Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're joining forces with Allant Group today to talk about customer data enrichment using third-party data. We'll be talking about how you can use Treasure Data's customer data platform to not only better leverage your own data sources, but enrich and up-level your customer profiles and engagements using a variety of methods. Our speakers today are Paul Ernst, SVP of Campaign Management, and Jimmy Yee, Principal of Analytic Solutions, both representing Allant Group. As for myself, my name is Sean with the Business Development Team at Treasure Data. I'll be your host for today's session. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We'll be taking questions throughout today's call, so feel free to submit them throughout the session. We'll reserve the last 10 minutes or so to answer these live. We've got some resources attached available for you to download at any time during today's call. If you have any technical issues, try refreshing your browser as a first step. We found that generally tends to do the trick. Be sure to send over any feedback. We read any and all comments that come in. And finally, this is a recorded session, so this webinar will be available for you to view on demand using the same link you used to access this session today. But before we hand the mic over to our main speakers, we'll start with a quick introduction to Treasure Data, what we do and why we exist. So we were founded in 2011, originally as a cloud data warehousing company dealing with some really hardcore issues around data management and complexity. But just a year later in 2012, a lot of our clients began requesting marketing-specific use cases centered around customer data. So our founders, sensing an opportunity at that time, they quickly pivoted and repurposed our brand into the very first enterprise customer data platform, way before the space began to explode in popularity by 2018. Just last year, we received multiple accolades, including Best Customer Data Platform by Martech Awards and analyst firm Frost & Sullivan. We're also the only pure-play CDP on any Gartner Magic Quadrant, which I think really speaks to our data warehousing roots, as well as our ability to deal with huge enterprise data problems. Today, we're 100% financially backed by SoftBank, one of the largest and most well-funded private equity firms worldwide. We're compliant with some of the world's strictest data privacy and security regulations, including GDPR and CCPA. We've got around 400 employees worldwide, with offices in Mountain View, California, Vancouver, France, England, Japan, Korea, and India. And we've got 400 plus customers worldwide, including some very recognizable names like Anheuser-Busch InBev, LG, Condé Nast, and Subaru. So why does Treasure Data exist, and what is the problem we're trying to solve? Well, today, the expectation is for companies to have tons of information on their customers, which they can then leverage to create these awesome customer experiences. But the problem is that combining these various sources is difficult, and that's exactly what's being demonstrated on this chart over here. New technologies are constantly arising for every little niche use case that isn't already being solved by existing technologies. However, as we see with this orange curve at the bottom, organizations have systems and processes already in place. So due to politics maybe, or simply an unwillingness to let go of existing technologies, they're staying largely stagnant despite the constant innovation that's happening in the field on a yearly basis, leading to this growing gap in capabilities. I think this infographic really gives you a sense of how much the marketing technology space has grown over the last decade. Back in 2011, there were only maybe 150 or so total marketing technology vendors. But in 10 short years, that number has grown, again, exponentially to 7,000 plus. So what this is indicative of is that no single vendor today can solve the entirety of the marketing puzzle alone, and that marketing today involves cherry-picking many technologies that satisfy many specific needs. The bottom line being that there simply isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for every enterprise marketing problem. So if you have omni-channel marketing ambitions, you need to find some way of unifying these various channels to maximize all the customer data at your disposal. So what Treasure Data is promising is the ability to glue all these different marketing tools, data sources, and channels together so that data can flow smoothly from point A to point B. So what we see here on this slide is Treasure Data simplifying every step of your data analytics pipeline, from data collection using our 300 plus built-in integrations, to unification and enrichment, to analysis, segmentation, predictive scoring, and of course, final activation to your destination channels for you to immediately or automatically act on your derived insights. So what we're doing in effect is up-leveling your marketing organization by letting you select all the perfect tools for each specific problem and use all these tools together as if they were built to be used together in the first place, instead of being locked into one single enterprise vendor that might do some things well and other things terribly. By helping you connect all these respective systems, we're able to gain visibility into how a customer or shopper like Jasmine Yu over here is interacting with our brand across our various channels. We can then start introducing second and third-party data, perhaps broad market trend data, or maybe data that comes from an external source through an ID graph. But we can use second and third-party data to fill in any potential gaps and give you a fuller understanding of who your customers are and what really makes them tick. The end result is a complete 360-degree customer profile that tracks each step of the customer's interactions with our brand, as well as an automated process by which your company easily reacts to actions taken by your customers. So, boosting and enriching first-party data with second and third-party data. That's going to be the focus for this talk today. So before we move on, I'll talk briefly about a couple case studies that demonstrate how treasure data customers are using second and third-party data enrichment to maximize the results from their marketing campaigns, starting with Subaru. Subaru, as you may know, is a global automotive manufacturer that in 4 short years went from relative obscurity to being one of the most beloved car brands worldwide. They're collecting first-party data from sources like their loyalty program, dealership info, maintenance logs, and marketing automation and social media. But step 2 for Subaru is data enrichment. Subaru is collecting all sorts of anonymous data from a variety of different sources, including their own cookie-targeted ads, anonymous visits to their website, but most importantly, by introducing second and third-party data from car comparison sites to give their customer profiles additional context. For example, what types of cars they've been browsing, what types of features they prefer, and what time of day they browsed. Subaru was able to identify the most valuable segments of prospective customers. In other words, those prospects that were right on the cusp of purchasing a car. Subaru then automatically personalized their communications to fit these customer-specific needs. This data enrichment effort yielded the following results. So first, by introducing outside data, their predictive model improved its accuracy from 26% to 73%. Now, using this improved model, they launched a targeted cashback campaign to their prospects who were flagged as likely to buy by this predictive model, resulting in a $26 million increase in sales in less than a year with an order rate increase of 15%. They also experienced a 350% increase in advertising click-through rates, and this was all after being set up in less than 3 weeks. Now, Parco is a company you might not be too familiar with, but they're the #1 department store chain in Japan with 18 locations and 3,000 retailers being housed at their malls. Their data enrichment story is frankly unconventional, but I think all the more fascinating because of it. They're collecting data from the following sources, including geolocation data, IoT devices, loyalty programs, cell phone apps, rooftop weather sensors, and browsing data online. Now, if you're anything like me, you might have paused for a second when I mentioned weather sensor data, because on its surface, this sounds like data that has nothing to do with our individual customers. But what Parco did was segment their customers by region. And depending on their respective regions, these customers would receive personalized deals according to the weather. So for example, if it was rainy, shoppers would receive a coupon redeemable only by coming in store. Or if it was hot, maybe they'd send a coupon for one of their refreshment parlors or stores selling beach gear. But in any case, their results were as follows. Parco experienced a 35% increase in in-store visits using their loyalty app, a 25% increase in purchase rates through IoT-based promotions, and thanks to their weather sensor data, they essentially removed the negative effects of retail seasonality by making Parco a key rainy day destination in Japan. And by the way, our attachments include a white paper on data enrichment that also talks about how a certain top 5 video game publisher is boosting the size and accuracy of their predictive segments tenfold by enriching their data on Treasure Data CDP. So be sure to check that out if any of this sounds interesting to you. So I think this all goes to show that data enrichment is an important step, especially for enterprises when it comes to better targeting your audiences, and it's something that Treasure Data CDP was designed to assist with at scale. But I think with that, we can hand the wheels over to the Allant Group team to see how specifically these types of use cases can be made possible and how Allant's own methodologies can unlock value from treasure data that might not have been readily apparent by everyday users. Paul?
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to add my screen share in. All right. Good. Thank you, Sean. We are very excited to be here and be able to go over how Allant uses the Treasure Data Platform to integrate first-party data and third-party data for more effective modeling and targeting. I'm going to do a lot of the how section of our presentation, and I'll be going over ingesting, bringing in data from multiple data sources, and show you how to do that with Treasure data easily. And then unifying that information that's brought in and build a 360 customer view with the automatic Treasure data master segment functionality. And then finally, I'll talk about how we can take those anonymous and known customers and enrich them with third-party attributes. Then I will turn over the presentation to Jimmy, and Jimmy will go through using the Treasure data functionality for modeling and how we use that and integrate that with third-party data for more effective models, and then how to manage and optimize that and just demonstrate that using dashboards inside the tool and outside the tool in Tableau. So that's the agenda for today's meeting. And we will start first by just taking a quick review of the platform if you've never seen the Treasure Data Platform. So there's three major components. First is in that ingestion, in bringing in that large amount of information, they have many standard custom standard connectors. And we can use your credentials for those environments to create an authentication and then be able to pull information into the Treasure Data Platform as a source of data. And so after working with those integrations and then you use the data workbench, you're able to then query and investigate and then prepare all of the information that flows into the master segments. And that master segment uses identity resolution to pull together all the information from the disparate data sources and then brings it available into that master segment so that we can now activate that and use it to activate audiences, to build segments and push it into predictive scoring right inside the tool. So all of these actions are built directly in the tool. Now, I want to just take a few seconds, one slide, to show how Allant integrates all of these aspects and can operate the Treasure Data Platform on your behalf or in concert with a brand. And we understand certainly the wide and very deep bringing in of first-party data from all your different data sources. So whether they are the standard connectors or custom connectors, we know how to wrangle the data and make it available in the Treasure Data Platform. And it's very important to integrate the customer preferences, as you know, and we can ingest those from systems, maintain them, utilizing custom consent platforms, which will demonstrate a little bit of our platform that we use for our integration, OneTrust. And then once we have that information available to us, applying third-party data and bringing that all together with identity resolution and storing it in the customer data platform, and then pushing that to the analyze, segment, and orchestrate capabilities of Treasure data, and we can push it out externally. And then utilizing those targeted models to activate audiences across all the different channels. So we are very comfortable with using Treasure data to accomplish that, and let's show you a little bit about how we would do it. So one of the first things that we do is if you have first-party data that you need to ingest, they have a tremendous catalog of connectors. And if you were to use one of the connectors, you can create a data source that you can pull in using your authorization connection to the platforms. And so it's as simple as adding those auth credentials and then actually connecting to and download the information. So we put in our connection to our Salesforce environment, and we're going to use that Salesforce as one of the sources for our demonstration data today. And I double-clicked on that source, and in the wizard, it gives you the ability to identify the information that you're going to be pulling from inside the Salesforce platform or any wizard-driven connector. And then as we go do it, if you had separate brands and you only wanted to pull in a certain ones, or if you had certain types of customers you only wanted to pull in, there are all of the criteria that you can put in a wizard to be able to pull just the data that you want. Now, once you get that data and you want to understand what it's going to look like, you can preview it, and then eventually you just point it to the database and the table that is stored, where this data is automatically stored into the Treasure Data platform. And we can set up a schedule to run as frequent as you like, and when you're scheduling that, it automatically refreshes the data in the platform. So now when the data comes in the platform, we have a query here that is going against our Salesforce data. And you can see that it is integrated to Salesforce ID and information from those Salesforce records. You can see billing, city, and state. And all of the fields that are available, you can grab and bring down automatically. So the integration for this now exposes all of your Salesforce data to the marketing environment and able to load those contacts and accounts into the database to be used as the starting source for your first-party data. Now, that seems like a good start, but then many times, the next step is, where are we going to get some of the digital data? So when we think about that digital data, we think about the idea of JavaScript tagging on the website or being able to do it. And the Treasure Data platform has the functionality built right into it to be able to tag your website and ingest that data right into the platform. They give you all the information. One of the things that's nice to see is that the documentation for the platform is very well done and has a tremendous amount of information if you need to look up information on how to do things. So with this, we now have to integrate that JavaScript tag, and in our environment, we know that the Treasure Data tag is by default turned off for first-party and third-party cookies. So the default setting is not to enable that in Treasure Data. Now, when you have your environment, when they visit, and we use OneTrust, and you can see our OneTrust setting here, as soon as you capture consent, then we can turn on Treasure Data to be able to capture those cookies. And then as the information flows in, we now have access to that information. And so where you can see the TD Global ID, third-party ID, and you can see other information like their IP address, and this is particularly from our web tagging with that pixel. As they come into the website, you can see what URL they came to and all of the information associated with their activity. So there is no need to have a second set of tagging capabilities. It is built right into the tool. And the platform when we have available to it, now if you were going to tag with a pixel and not with a JavaScript tag, we now have the capability, once again, built right into the tool and able to be used for tagging creatives. And when we have that image tag in place, we can pass in any kind of custom values that you want and are available for either the segments that are being advertised to, or if we, in our example, we put it in an email, being able to put in information that you have known about the email and being able to pass that in the pixel tagging. Now, once again, that data as it flows in, if you have consent and you know the information, we get the global ID for matching, we get the IP address, and the UTM source medium campaign are tags that we put into our pixel tag and passed along. So now we can see from this pixel all kinds of different information that you can pass in and then record automatically in your treasure data database. No need to have different solutions and then ingesting them later. They come in automatically. And with our tagging and the identification of the individuals, it starts to stitch together that record from first-party data and then as you come in and do your digital acquisitions. Now, these were all standard functions of the Treasure Data platform. And if you have a source that would be a custom integration, we can also utilize the features of Treasure Data and their scripting language. It's an open source language called DigDag. And I have a DigDag script up here that can connect to the source data from our email platform, which is Acoustic Campaign, and we have the Calamity secret and tokens to be able to access that information. We can pass that in and integrate with existing Python scripts or Python and execute these DigDag workflows on a nightly basis. And just like before, in these scripts, we are able to identify the table and the information of where it's going to flow in. And when we get that data in, once again, it can pull in all custom data, including, for example, if recipient ID was the key for the Acoustic Campaign, and what mailing and what they were sent, and then what kind of activities they had against those profiles, being able to integrate all of that information and have it all in one place so that we can now have that integrated master customer record. So if it's not automatic, digital acquisitions and custom connectors can all be done within inside the platform. The power is when we go to bring that data together inside that platform. When we had talked about, we had just gone through all the integrations and bringing in the base data and how we can tie that together and produce a master segment that pulls the information and makes it available for all attributes, whether they're first party coming from the Salesforce data or whether it's coming from a custom connector like your email platform, or whether it's behaviors like web visits and reoccurring information. So the platform is built to ingest and then connect any sources of those informations and use identity resolution to do so. And so as we go through, you can see that we have information from our first party information and now information from our third party connected to the platform. And we can utilize many different sources to be able to provide information that would be valuable to complete the customer profile, to complete the customer record, and be able to understand that data and utilize it in activations and in modeling. So that first set of being able to bring this data together, now the power becomes now how can we combine that with a third-party set of data being brought over. And so I want to talk a little bit about our identity graph and how we are able to leverage that. So first, our graph, identity graph, leverages a patented persistent identification technique that uses multiple sources, including browser ID, user agent, MAIDs, hashed email. And we're able to take that information and use probabilistic matching to identify the devices that should match to the consumer. And it's very useful in being able to get a profile for which we can use for adaptive ad targeting. And then once we have this connection and as it rolls up, if we have the privacy connection, we can do the direct identity crosswalk to the terrestrial data, to address data, map on the digital key, and provide that to you. Now, that uses a deterministic approach to directly match that information and which can be used for precise direct communications. Now, the key for all of this is to be able to do it in a privacy secure manner. And when we implement the third-party identity graph for anonymous users, so let's say that we have a ad impression that when you are impressed with that ad and that event is sent to our identity graph through our event stream, that digital identity must be masked until there's a click-through or a brand identification. So in a identity mask solution, you are not allowed to see any of the connectors, but we can use the demographic attributes in segments, in queries, in analysis to determine effectiveness. Now I'm just going to click on one to show you that the information can be connected to you when we have a set of information and being tracked at an anonymous level. And those anonymous levels can only be used in a secure manner, as I said. Now, when we have a brand identification event and we are able to now connect our anonymous identity to an identification event like a click-through would be an example. We now can look at the information and show that we now get connected to our terrestrial address, and all of the information that is available was on the left-hand side is now available to utilize for retargeting or analysis of your segments or other campaigns. And so as we go through that connection, we are able to connect the information together based on the appropriate privacy and connections and be able to address third-party information provided at an anonymous level and at an anonymous but identified on our graph level. Now, if we were saying, well, how can I get this done? Well, one of the ways in which Treasure Data makes this easy to be done is that they have a concept called treasure boxes. And in Treasure Data, we are able to go to a treasure box, and here's our third-party enrichment treasure box, and be able to connect to the information and get all of the treasure data items that are required to bring in this third-party data and match to your identities. And so the information that's available is made easy by being able to download and integrate that treasure data objects to get an identity key and be able to start using the third-party enrichment data. Now, one of the things that you'll see when we look at what kind of data is available, we have many, many data sources available to you. And so when you have a known customer and we are able to get to that terrestrial address, we are able to use that wide breadth of data with keying and then matching to and enabling the rich data set to be brought down. And so when I go to a third-party set of information for a known customer, we see now it is no longer just an identity key, it's actually me. And when we look at the information, we have all sets of information from my website visit and sessions and durations, information from our email environment, and being able to tie things together like past or current email addresses, and being able to use that information to identify demographics and be able to utilize that information in direct marketing campaigns for your known users. And so the Treasure Data Platform has this all integrated, the master segment, that deals with identity and privacy, and now can be used to expose to the rich environment of their modeling, targeting, and activation. So now I'm going to turn over this presentation to Jimmy Yee, who's going to take on the last two parts of our presentation to target and build more effective models.
Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate it. And thanks, Sean, for the introduction. So, as Paul mentioned at the beginning of his piece, I'm going to be covering off on two main topics today. I'm going to start off in the audience studio in Treasure Data and show how you can really do advanced analytics directly in the Treasure Data platform with easy point-and-click processes, right? We're going to also talk about how you can connect to R and Python packages. In today's example, we're actually going to export data outside of the platform into a SaaS environment and to do some advanced analytics, and then how you can feed that right back in and combine it with the previous model that we've built. So specifically, when we do the advanced analytics in the Treasure Data platform, we're going to be building a predictive targeting model, looking for customers who look like your top 3 value segment tiers. Outside the platform, in SaaS, we're actually going to build a customer segmentation and then feed that back in so that you can actually combine that predictive model and look at scores by segment. Now, the second piece is in treasure reporting. I'm going to show some functionality within the Treasure Data platform so you can do some easy data visualization. And then, of course, if you want to connect to outside data visualization platforms, you can really easily plug and play via the Treasure Postgres data tank. All right, so let's just talk about data enrichment. So let's say you have your customer file, your customer data all loaded in, you enrich that with third-party data, and you find, 4 key, profiles, right? We're talking about things like marital status, presence of children, interests, income, things like that, And what are we really trying to accomplish here, right? We want to take the customer database, we want to be able to identify unique groups, we want to focus on individuals. But clearly, profiles are exclusive by nature. Let's say that person over there on the left is your key target, and that turns out to be your best, most profitable profile. Now, somebody could fit all that criteria perfectly, but they might be age 21 or age 29. Maybe their income is 64 or 91. Now, these people are probably really, really good targets for you, but because the profiling really deals with specific parameters, those people would not be included, in any kind of targeting that you would do, using these strict parameters, right? So enter predictive modeling, right? What models do is, creates an algorithm that simultaneously analyzes all those variables. So you don't necessarily have to fall into those specific parameters. It's going to analyze all the variables across the board, give relative weighted importance to each of those variables, and simultaneously analyze, whether or not somebody fits that profile well or not. So again, even if you don't fit one of those pieces perfectly, you could still be scoring very, very high. All right? So how does that work in action? Let's say this is your customer base, right? Really no differentiation between them all. You have that predictive modeling algorithm, and what it does is it provides a score for each and every individual. So now all of a sudden your best targets reveal themselves. And because it's a numerical score, you can rank all those people in order. So essentially what you see is all those best targets rising to the top. So a typical result of predictive modeling, using it for audience selection, it's something like this. We can drive the same number of responders by targeting just 30% of the available universe versus communicating to the entire potential audience. Now, it's important to note that, again, everybody is scored and ranked in order, so it's not just identifying the top targets, it's really ranking all those people in order, right? All your potential targets. Now, that becomes really, really important as we start to talk about activation and optimization. So just to cover off on two main predictive models that probably most of the audience is very familiar with, it's a customer clone lookalike model. So maybe taking a group of your best customers and trying to identify the characteristics that you can apply to the prospect universe to be able to find those best targets, right? Now, a response model builds upon that customer clone model because, unfortunately, your best customers aren't always the type of people who are going to be most responsive to marketing communications. So it's a little bit of an art form to find that great balance between who are good customers, who are almost best customers, but who's also most likely to respond too. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about how the predictive model is used for activation and optimization, going beyond just being a targeting mechanism. All right? So here's a recent model we built, captured about 70% of the responders and 30% of the universe. So clearly, again, just using it as a targeting mechanism and a budget optimization tool, you are going to budget the highest percentage those most likely to respond. Now over there on the right, it's really important that you also budget a smaller but statistically significant percentage those less likely, right? Because everyone is scored and ranked in order, you should see nice diminishing returns from those most likely to those least likely to respond. So you can constantly validate your model, see if it deteriorates, right? And then also, the other thing it'll do is allow for some unexpected results. So perhaps you can identify some customer segments that you didn't previously identify, right? A lot of times a customer database is the function and product of the type of marketing you've done in the past. So doing this, again, leaves some room for some unexpected results, all right? So let's just look at an easy example. Again, I said it multiple times already, but the predictive model is not just an audience targeting mechanism, right? Creates a scientific platform for reporting, analysis, and optimization. So instead of just observing overall response rates and saying, wow, this worked really well or this didn't work really well, even if the results aren't quite what you expected, you can kind of look in deeper and say, okay, well, who did it actually work for? So that's what the predictive model does. It also allows you to combine it with other factors too. And just for the easiest example, right? Let's say you're trying to drive people to a specific physical location, right? Within a really tight radius, you can cast a much wider net and go down to maybe even some of those that are least likely to respond, right? As you move out in radius, let's say you go out to 5 or 10 miles, you can really focus that targeting in on those who are a little bit more likely to respond. And as you move even further out into a 10 or 15 mile radius, now you can really be surgical and precise about just targeting those people who are most likely. Okay? And in today's world, obviously, there's a lot of e-commerce. So, in that case, you really can cast a wide net. All right? So let me jump into the Treasure Data platform and show you how easy it is, this point-and-click mechanism. All right? So you can see, you can select your training population, right? So who is the model going to be based on? Your scoring target, who do you want to score in the end? and then your positive sample. In this case, we're looking at the top 3 value segment tiers. So who's most likely to increase, their spend and become, more valuable customers, right? Now you can see down below there's going to be a list of suggested predictive features, both categorical and quantitative. It's easy to add and remove and do some iterative approaches to see what works best. Once you have all those selections made, you simply click Train. And this great function, I love this, is the workflow page. You can actually see how this is all progressing, right? You can see all the steps here on the left, right? And as each of these steps are completed, you can kind of see this green finishing, right? It's really, really easy to keep track. Now this is a relatively, smaller data size, so this takes about 7 to 10 minutes to run. But in the end, what you're going to get as a result looks something like this. So we can see from left to right, we're going from those least likely to those most likely, right? In this case, we see about 27% falling into those least likely, 47% marginally, 20% possibly, and then 10% likely, right? That's graphically shown here as well. And if you look down here below, it'll give you a readout of your positive and negative variables. And then over here on the right, you can see just some basic statistics and some counts of your customer base based on these most important variables. All right, so really, really easy to use, really, really quick. All right, so let me jump back into the my PowerPoint here. And so what we're going to do next is actually pull data out, put it into a platform, like an advanced analytics platform like SAS, and talk about doing segmentation, right? So organic clustering, what it does is identifies natural patterns in the data, determine the distinguishing variables and combination of factors. Ultimately, obviously what you're trying to do is find groups that are homogeneous within themselves, but significantly differentiated from other customer groupings, right? Now, segmentation provides detailed insights. So if we start over there on the left, you're going to find differentiated groups by demographics, age, income, marital status, children, merchandise. What are the specific products purchased, product categories, market baskets? You can look at attitudinal data, right? Marketing, contact history, responsiveness to channels, and then of course your behavioral, your customer value, your credit usage, loyalty engagement. These are all the kinds of data that go in and create that differentiated groups, all right? So in this particular example, we started with 432,000 customers, all right? There are some outliers that don't make sense to include in that segmentation. If we start over there on the left, there were some group purchases that just behave a little bit differently than the individual customers we're trying to segment. There were some lost customers who haven't had a transaction in a long time, so they're a little bit of an outlier as well too. There's some new customers there that don't quite have enough transaction data to really make sense to put into the segmentation. And then there's just some deleted records, people that were given some samples and things like that where, it doesn't really make sense to include them either. So removing all those outliers, end up with a segmentation group of 366,591. And then through an iterative approach, right, we ended up, in this case, with 8 different clusters. Now, segmentation is really a place where, science and art intersect. So it's really, really, again, an iterative approach. You can kind of see what 9 segments look like, what 5 segments look like. As you do these different iterations, you can kind of say, okay, these 2 groups are really, really similar. Maybe we could reduce the number of clusters down and see what that looks like, right? Until you get to a point where, again, you're creating groups that are homogeneous within themselves, but really differentiated from all the other groups, okay? So here's the segmentation results. This is really an eye chart, but if you can see there on the top right, everything is kind of scored and ranked in color-coded order. So, starting from red all the way up to purple, being high, these are all ranked. So you can see down below as this fills out, there's an RFM piece to it, as well as a demographic piece to it. And then there's also a survey component as well too. So it's a real ensemble segmentation approach where you're looking at different customer segments based on demographics and behavioral, right? So if I can just, direct your attention to just a couple little pieces here, right? Segment 6 is the best one. It's 20% of the customer base, so it makes up 28.4% of the revenue. Over here on the right, you can see that there's a group that's 21%, right? but their recency, it ranks at a 7, so they're pretty low. Frequency is 8, so they still rank pretty low. And then their monetary is about middle of the road. And that ends up having that group ranked second worst. All right? So if we look at an example, here's the most loyal families. That's the first one we identified. 20% of the base, that makes up about 28.4% of the revenue. This isn't quite getting to the level of persona yet, but it's at least, looking at all the demographics and outlining what these groups look like, right? So with an average of 65 months, these most loyal families are the longest tenured customers. They have the highest recency, highest monetary total, right? They're likely homeowners. And despite their income, they don't index extremely high in activities nor general shopping behavior. And we see that a lot with families, especially families with younger children. Their priorities are a little bit different. So as opposed to a younger family with no children that maybe has the same income, they would index really, really high in activities and general shopping behavior and things like that. All right. So now when we pull that back into treasure data, right, we can see now that combination, right, and how powerful that can be when you're looking at both that segmentation that we built now overlaid over those customer segments. So here's the count by segment up there. And then now you can see down here deciles by cluster. So you can see the 8 clusters that we just looked at there, and then average deciles. So deciles meaning taking that scored and ranked universe and dividing it up into 10 equal parts. So obviously, the lower the average decile score is within each of these clusters, you can start to immediately identify that, your cluster here looks really, really good. Cluster 5, cluster 6, right? Cluster 2 really looks like they have the highest average decile, so probably your worst cluster there, right? So here's the example of reporting within treasure data. You can start to look at your income by cluster, your average age by cluster, right, 10-year month, all kinds of things like that. So as we discussed, you can also, connect it, easy plug and play to something like a Tableau environment. Up here, if we start on the left, you can kind of see the spend by channel. In the middle here, you can see that, we have the 8 clusters again. There's a count on the y-axis, and then you can really see how this lays out with the value tiers. Again, here's counts by cluster. And this is a little bit difficult to see here, but it's pretty clear to see, right? This is decile scores here at the bottom. You can easily see which one has the highest ones, and then which one has the highest 10s too. So again, you can start to see, hey, which of my clusters look the best? With that scoring model, we can dive into each of those segments and pick the best targets for any kind of campaign you might want to do. Now, when we look at some marketing results here, you have your test response and your control response here. Like we talked about earlier, you see a little blip in decile 7. You see nice diminishing returns across the board here, and you see a little blip here. So, that's the time to go in and investigate and say, hey, what's different about these people? Why didn't they score higher? And this is really an opportunity to maybe gain a competitive advantage, find a segment that maybe your competitors didn't identify, and to really be able to refine your targeting. Again, here's a control and test by segment. So again, you can see how now with segmentation and predictive modeling combined, you're really able to, have some power in not only sending relevant messages that make sense to the segment, but actually being able to target the right people within each of those segments as well. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over. Sean?
Awesome, thank you. So I'm just going to remove the screen share, get back to our slides. Okay, great. So awesome. Thank you so much, Paul and Jimmy. Looks like we have some questions coming in.
Yeah, I see one here that I can take. Okay. It says, can you comment, how will a future cookieless world affect a brand's ability to bring in second and third-party data? And it just so happens that our identity graph is not cookie dependent, and I think I said this in the middle of it, we leverage a patented persistent identification technique created using non-cookie technology, including individual level hash data not dependent on cookies, like browser agent, browser ID agent, hashed emails. So there is a combination of that, and as we look at, like iOS 14 changes that are coming up, we know that it is going to be more difficult, and we're going to have to see how that customer behavior happens and whether they continue to allow if people just click through and accept or not. But it's specifically, our identity graph is not reliant on a cookie world.
Okay.
Now,
so let's see.
there's another one there I think I can grab, which is how does the actual treasure box for third-party data enrichment work? And I could show that here. I guess I can screen share. Let me see if I can do that.
Okay. So back to the cookie question then, would it be fair to say that third-party data coming in from your own like advertising channels and cookies, that's going to be limited, but when it comes to ID graphs, that's not going to be so impacted, right?
Well, I think certain ID graphs maybe, but ours has a combination of variables that enables that to happen. And so if I go back to my treasure box piece where I was at before, see here it says Get Started, and when you click Get Started, it has all of the information available to you that takes you through the process of getting the API key to be able to integrate in your treasure data setup. It gives you the workflows and dig-dag scripts to be able to do that, and it gives you the ability to customize and submit to the APIs the information needed to be able to get third-party data appended, and all of the information that we use to customize the treasure data platform to be able to deliver this information back to you. And there's also a description of all of the different types of third-party data that we can append and provide to you. So it's a good set of information for you to read, and it also has all of the objects right here at the top to be able to download and be able to start that process inside of treasure data.
Perfect. I see we have another one. I'm guessing this might be for Jimmy, but so the other question is, you described a predictive model in your example. Is there a way to automate the execution of the models for more frequent tuning?
Yeah, great question. So, you could use the treasure data workflows that we looked at to manage your supervised learning process, right? So by using the dig-dag treasure data operators within your treasure data workflow, you can automate your machine learning, everything from data preparation to prediction. So dig-dag can run tasks in parallel, so you can simultaneously run independent tasks such as, parameter tuning, right? Treasure data workflows also enable you to make prediction tasks a periodic part of your offerings. So, having a stable way to run and evolve your machine learning processes in batches, on an hourly or daily basis is a good way to evolve them and drive a better predictive model, right? You can also, enable your local machine learning environment, with treasure data as well.
Awesome. I think we have one more question. You mentioned a 3-week setup time for Subaru. Is this a typical turnaround time for CDP? So I think I was the one that brought this up in the intro, so I'll take a stab. So for full transparency, a 3 to 5 week implementation timeframe isn't too uncommon. I think in Subaru's case, we kind of had the situation where everything was just in alignment. They did their work beforehand. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, what their data sources were, and they also initially only relied on our direct plug-and-play connectors. But that's not to say that CDP implementation is typically invasive. Far from it. You can generally expect a month or two for deployment because it is a very nimble solution that's 100% cloud-based. We don't interfere with any existing processes. We only augment. If a deployment does take longer than that general time frame, it's usually not due to any limitations of the system, but rather it's the project team trying to decide which features they want to implement first and make sure they maximize their CDP investment and get up on the right footing. I don't think I included an attachment for this specifically, but you can try searching Google for CDP readiness checklist to see how you can prepare for, or rather prepare your marketing stack to be ready for a CDP deployment. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for the questions. But again, this webinar will be available on demand, excuse me, using this very same address. Be sure to download our attachments as well. But thank you to everybody for listening in and participating. Be sure to check out our channel for more interesting conversations around the marketing technology world. And with that, I think we're all set. To everyone in the audience, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.